Hi there, everyone. My name is Max, and I'd like to thank you all on behalf of Vroman's Bookstore for tuning in to tonight's event. Tonight, we are lucky to have with us author Kwei Quartey, who will be in conversation with Naomi Hirahara, discussing the second book in Kwei's Emma Jam series, Sequel My Lady. Tonight's event does include a Q&A portion, so if you'd like to ask a question at any point, go ahead and click the Ask a Question button towards the bottom, and we'll go ahead and get to that towards the end of the event. And lastly, to purchase Kwei's books from Vroman, go ahead and click the green button down below, and you'll all be redirected to our website. And once again, I'd just like to thank you all so much for continuing to support us throughout, the past year, basically. We really appreciate it, and we really couldn't do it without you. But with that all out of the way, I will go ahead and introduce our authors for tonight. Kwei Quartey is a crime fiction writer and a physician living in Pasadena, California. Having practiced medicine for more than 20 years while simultaneously working as a writer, he has attained noteworthy achievements in both fields. Dr. Quartey is a member of the Los Angeles chapter of Sisters in Crime and made the Los Angeles Times bestseller list in 2009. He was awarded the title of Best Male Author by GOG National Book Club the following year. His books include the Inspector Darko Dawson series and the Emma Jam Investigation series, which we're talking about tonight. And with him, Naomi Hirahara is the Edgar Award-winning and author of the Masarai Mystery series. She's also the author of the Ellie Rush series and Life After 99. A graduate of Stanford University, Naomi has also written many books about gardening and Japanese American history and culture, and has contributed to several anthologies and collaborative books, including Los Angeles Noir, Santa Cruz Noir, and Prospect Park's Hometown Pasadena. So with that all out of the way, I will go ahead and let them take over. Thank you all so much.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear us okay? Yeah, and it's wonderful. Kwei, it's so good to see you.
Nice to see you.
I wish we were.
After all this time.
I know we're sheltered in place in the same city, but we haven't really seen each other.
Right.
We just traded photos of like coyotes, like walking around Pasadena on social media. But first of all, Kwei, I just wanted, how have you been doing during the pandemic? I mean, has it been hard for you to write, and what have you been doing?
Well, it has been difficult in a lot of ways. I'm having a problem with my audio. Hold on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's been happening is that because things have changed so much since even, I'd say, 2016, it's not so much the difficulty with getting material. It's actually, getting down to do it because of the amount of distraction, the number of different events that have been going on, politically, in terms of our health and so on, the lockdowns, and so on. So that has been, a distraction for me. Creative wise, it doesn't affect me too much, but it's definitely slowed me down in terms of the efficiency with which I get things, writing done.
You said that you were exercising outside.
Yeah, I go to an outside gym, which is outdoors. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Kwei, I have such an affinity for you personally and your two series. Let's see. I think some people are having problems with Wi-Fi. Is everyone kind of following us? If you could, yeah, okay. It seems like people are.
I have a little bit of an echo. I'm not sure how to get rid of it.
Do you think you opened two Crowdcast accounts? Sometimes that happens.
Let's see. You might be right.
People are saying yes, so that's
Brilliant.
okay. Are you okay?
You solved my problem.
Okay, awesome. I've done something good tonight. Okay. And the reason why I have an affinity for you, one is your background. One of your parents is an immigrant, your father, right? And your other is your mother is American born. And
Mhm.
that's my case too. Although the country is different, but the situation is similar. So at first, I wanted to explore, why did you decide to write books set in your father's home country? Because that's a harder challenge than writing it here in America. So, I'm sure you've answered this question many times, but why don't you tell us?
Well, actually, I grew up in Ghana till my late teens. So and I spent time during in that period. I spent time both in Ghana and the U.S. Um, so I had a lot of experience growing up in Ghana as well, and the reason why I write about Ghana, it's a little bit of a story in that it took me a while to find my niche or my niche as to what to write. I was in the just before 2000. I was sort of casting around for things to actually write about, and then I finally decided that I was going to write. Actually, what happened was I saw on TV this very interesting documentary about a uh, a detective in rural Cote d'Ivoire, which is right next door to Ghana, and he used to sort of threaten his suspects and witnesses with witchcraft if they didn't tell him the truth. And he was sort of a really brutal guy. And the funny thing is, this was a real documentary. It wasn't acted out at all. I said, "Nah, that is fascinating." And so I sort of thought, well, maybe what I could do is write a similar kind of story, but I would set it in a country like Ghana. Now, at the time, I was here in the States and I hadn't been back to Ghana in some almost 20 years. So my problem was I sort of wasn't up to date with all the different things that were going on in Ghana. And so I actually wrote a story in a Ghana-like country. I forget which title I gave the country. And when I submitted it to an agent, she said to me, she said, well, I like the story. I don't think I'll be able to place it. But she said, I'm just curious, why did you write about a Ghana-like country when you grew up in Ghana? Why not just write about Ghana? And so that's when I realized, you know what, I'm gonna have to go back and see what's going on. And that's actually just before I wrote Wife of the Gods, which was the very first that was the debut novel for Darko Dawson's series. And that's when I started to go back to Ghana every year, basically to research what I was writing about. It's a good thing I did because things had so radically changed. I really almost had to rewrite the entire story because I got so many things wrong about it, which was because they were all based on my childhood memories, and things had changed so very much. Um, but it's a for me, and you probably have a similar experience. It's a fascinating country to write about because it's culture rich, but it's also plagued by a lot of the problems that we have in our own country, and that is, for example, the economic inequality or inequity, I should say, between various groups. We have millionaires there, but we also have people who are living on like $150 a month, not a week, but a month. So it's a country of great contrast, and this is a terrific setup for murder mystery. As you know, any country that has a lot of different contrasts, or any place with a lot of different contrasts, is rich for creation.
I was telling you, Quay, that when I was 19 in college, I spent a summer in Ghana. And at the time, I was like a voluntary work camper with the YMCA.
Oh,
And
cool.
when I was sent to Ghana, I didn't know much about it, right? And it's for those of you who don't know, it's on the Gold Coast, because like people think of like Kenya or animals, wild
Yeah,
animals or
yeah.
safaris. And no, this is like the Gold Coast. And I think the little things I knew about before was like in Japan, they have chocolate that's like Ghana, that's called Ghana. So, you know, the
Oh,
cocoa
really?
bean, yeah. So the
Yeah.
cocoa beans are from Ghana. So,
Yeah.
so we could thank Ghana for chocolate.
And Cote d'Ivoire. And Cote d'Ivoire.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, but it's a former British colony, so you could speak English, but it was like the first sub-Saharan country, right, to become independent.
Independent, yeah.
So it has
1957.
this main amazing importance. And
Mm-hmm.
Quay and I were talking about like for for African Americans here, because of the slave trade, they're probably connections for them
Mm-hmm.
in Ghana. So
Yep.
why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Well, 2019 was branded the so-called year of return. A lot of people went back to Ghana, including celebrities. People like Ludacris went. Cardi B was there. A lot of people that we know well, Steve Harvey, and so it was a sort of a renaissance and a return to your people's roots. I even heard of one person who said she was coming back to the States just to pack up her stuff and just go back to Ghana and stay. Um, so yeah, a lot of people a lot of Black Americans will hail from Ghana and Nigeria because of the slave trade, and along the coast of Ghana is dotted with all these castles and forts. The difference between a castle and a fort is the forts were usually to keep materials, to stock supplies and so on, and the castles were specifically trading in slaves. So that's the difference between a castle and a fort. So there's so many of them, but the most famous, of course, is the Elmina Castle, Cape Coast Castle, Christiansborg, which is in Accra itself. There's James Fort, there's Usher Fort, and there's several others that are um, of less importance, and some of them are in total ruins and haven't been very well preserved. But the fact is that actually almost there's so many Europeans that actually dipped their foot into the territory of Ghana, not just the Portuguese and the Dutch who came first, but the Germans, the Swedes, the Danes, uh, and of course the British all went to Ghana and had their period of time in which they were, the boss, in other words, and then just to be sort of overthrown by the next wave of Europeans who came along. The British, of course, were the last.
And so in the capital city of Accra, so the
Accra.
book that we're talking about right now, Sleep Well, My Lady, the second, Emma, and I was at school today. It's Jan, right?
Jan.
Jan
Emma Jan.
Investigations, Quay's second series, is set in Accra, and it's.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about this area? It's Troseco Valley
Mm-hmm.
where it's set. So tell us a little bit about this place.
Yeah. So basically, what happens in the story is that Lady Araba, which of course is one of the reasons why it's called Sleep Well, My Lady, is a fashion icon and a social celebrity, a social media phenomenon. And she has established her own, fashion empire and done very, very well. And the night before a major runway show in Accra Fashion Week, which is a real thing, by the way. There's Paris Fashion Week, New York Fashion Week, and Accra Fashion Week. She's discovered dead in the bedroom of her mansion. And she lives in Trosaco Valley, which is a very upscale, gated community. I like to call the Beverly Hills of Accra. And you can Google it. It's absolutely these gorgeous houses, $1 million and up, and it's guarded by security guards at the front. There's a tall iron gate at the entrance, where people are checked to make sure that they're not up to mischief. So the question, one of the earliest questions in the novel is, how did this murderer get into such a high security area, get into Lady Araba's locked home, murder her, get out, and all without detection? Because they arrested the chauffeur of Lady Araba, her faithful chauffeur, but of course he's a low man on the totem pole, so they always get arrested, because when you're looking for scapegoats, just grab the nearest poor person, right? So they got him, they grabbed him, threw him in jail, and that was the end of that. But Lady Araba's aunt, whose name is Aunt Dele, she is convinced that actually it was Lady Araba's lover, whose name is Augustus Caesar, who killed her. And because 10 months had lapsed between when the murder took place and nothing happening at all, she goes to seek help from, she knows Emma from the previous story where she solved the mystery. So she goes looking for Emma at her detective agency. And Emma has been there for about a year now, and she's now she's gotten her feet wet, and she's gotten used to everything. And so this person goes looking for her. But a lot of it is taken from real headlines. Number one, Lady Araba. I based the story on a story out of Kenya. This young woman who was killed in a very exclusive area of Nairobi in 2012, and who, up till this day, it's still a cold case. Nobody knows who killed her. And I borrowed that. And then Trosaco Valley is also a real place, so I wanted to use them. I was sort of debating, well, should I use the real place or should I rename it? But I said, no, the hell with that. I'll just go ahead. I might get some bad publicity, but that's okay. So I used that because it's just a perfect foil for this sort of really tranquil place that looks just like Beverly Hills, and suddenly, boom, you've got somebody murdered in the middle of it. So, yeah, I thought it was just it's one of those contrasts between, the apparent beauty of the place and then something underneath that is, really, really evil,
And I love that aspect. It's like a locked room mystery.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's really gaining popularity right now, especially
Yeah.
as we're quarantined.
Yeah, we're locked rooms.
Yeah. It's like, oh, what happened to him?
Right. Yeah. So it was in fact, I was planning to make it a real locked room mystery, but as I continue to write the book, that aspect of it didn't appeal to me quite yet. There's still a little bit of an aspect to that. There's actually a little trick in the book that will explain, to what extent it really is a locked room mystery. But there's still a little bit of that aspect as well.
What I find interesting about your Emma books too is like you're going into, well, the second book, you're really playing around with time.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of jumping around in time, but I give you credit because I could still follow it. So, did you write it more linearly in a first draft and then decide to, jump around? I mean, that's one question I have.
Okay. Yeah, no, I started it that way from the very start. And one of the reasons I did that was, you see, when Emma joins the story, it's actually 10 months it's 10 months after the murder. So, in terms of structure, you've got two choices. You can start with Emma when when Lady Aunt Dele came to her asking for her help. And then you can have Dele sort of recall everything, like, oh, I went to so and so, and he said this, and she said this, and she said that. And what happens with that is it turns into it turns into a rather monotonous narrative. You know, anybody who has read some of the old time mysteries, from Agatha Christie or Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, that was a very popular style where So the narrator sits down and he either relates to the protagonist or his companions what happened to him before. So it's, it's paragraphs and paragraphs of quotes within a quote. And I don't know, I find that so sort of, it sort of grinds on me a little bit because I find my attention sort of wavering.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second thing about it that I like is I actually like movies where you jump around in time. I love those kind of movies, especially when they're mysteries. They might start at one period and then they jump forward to the present and come back. Now, sometimes it does a number on your brain. You say, okay, wait, where are we now? But I love that aspect of sort of connecting. Oh, I see. That's what happened. And that explains what's happening right now at present. So I love that kind of back and forth. It's not easy though. It's very complicated, and the editors, always getting back to me and saying like, okay, it's impossible for this to have happened, 11 months ago because such and such has happened, and I go like, oh yeah, you're right. So it always needs a second pair of eyes. But I just love that format. And a lot of people have commented about it in that, like, at first they found it a little bit off-putting, but then they sort of got used to it.
Well, what's nice is you're getting into the heads of all these various suspects, but you're not telling us exactly, did this person do it? So that takes a lot of depth. I mean, that's complicated, and I give you a lot of credit for that because you do have to have some restraint, right?
Yes, I do. And sometimes there was one occasion where I was doing a rewrite, and I suddenly realized that I had accidentally dropped a clue, which if I had left it in, every reader would have known exactly what had happened. And the reason why is because I knew it, but I have to prevent myself from putting it on the page. And sometimes your mind lets its guard drop. And so, you have to be very careful that you don't drop clues as you go along back and forth, back and forth.
You're in some ways your book, like the Tana French's Dublin Murder Squad. She's kind of not just looking. I mean, it says Emma, but actually, you are. There's other people in the PI business that you look into too. So why did you call it Emma when actually it involves more than Emma?
Well, do you mean the name itself, or just the fact that it's a sort of ensemble piece?
I guess, yeah, both. Like instead of what is the name of the PI company again?
Oh yeah, the SOA Detective Agency.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So in the first book, it was really sort of focused in on Emma, and one of the reasons was that she had just gotten to the agency. So we're dealing with a lot of her issues of when she got there. She was very timid, she was diffident, she was uncertain of herself. And so I concentrated in a lot on her. And then SOA was we mostly saw SOA, who was the boss of the whole place. But we didn't see a lot of the other characters. And then this time, I don't know, for some reason, I just felt this need to sort of introduce the rest of the crew, because it seemed like unrealistic that she'd be working in an agency and we don't hear anything about, all the rest of the people. And I kind of looked at it a little bit like, the author Anne Cleves. She writes the Vera series, which is very popular on TV. Yes. And that's a sort of kind of ensemble piece. But in the end, Vera is sort of the one who brings it home. But she has all her people working on the case. And I kind of like that feeling of, the teamwork. But there's always somebody who stands out just a little bit. And I think this is what I did with this Emma Jan. But I think the third one in the series will be a little bit more focused on her again. So it may go back and forth,
Yeah, I find that really interesting. Oh, by the way, if you have any questions for Kwei, just press that ask a question and just put your question there, and we'll be handling that.
Yeah.
I also want to just talk a little bit about your background as a physician. I know you retired. I didn't know you retired, but I guess it's been a few years. But I know you've been writing blog posts about like the pandemic, and
Yeah.
you wrote about Ebola. So can you
Hmm.
talk a little bit about what you've been writing about?
Yeah. Well, well, the first part in 2018, I retired from medicine, and there were a couple reasons. One is that you know back then, Soho Press, I kind of got to know that one of the issues, issues that they were having, was that it was difficult for them to schedule me for events because I was still working as a physician. So, that meant I had to sort of find time to carve out my work schedule, which kind of restricted me to, weekends or days that I was off. And that made scheduling for them difficult, because it's like, well, Kwei's working on this day, so he can't do this. And so that was one of the issues. And then the second was that I had been thinking for a good 2 or 3 years prior to that I was going to retire from medicine and write full time. I gave like 30 years of my life to medicine. So, yeah, it got its share. So now it's time to turn full time to, my second love, which, well, it's really my first love, which is writing. Um, and, um, and the funny thing about that is that, although I although it freed up time in the sense of my having more of an option of when I could do stuff and what I could do and when, I didn't find that suddenly I had all this, hours and hours a day that I could just sit down and write. Because whenever you free up time, something else fills in. So, for example, now that I don't go to work as a doctor, so now I spend more time doing blogging, for example, or marketing, or publicity, things like that. So all of those sort of took their share of my time. So it's not that I can wake up at 6 in the morning and write till dusk, just because I'm not going to work as a physician. There are just so many other things to do. And then the other thing, of course, is that I don't know about you, Naomi, but when I think back to 2010, it just seemed like a much simpler time, and that's only 10 years ago. Now there are so many issues that we're dealing with. Never mind the publicity that I have to do in the marketing, but the world just seems a whole lot more complicated. And so there are a lot more distractions. I would say one of the difficulties about this year is that, well, 2020, is that there was so much going on, politically, the pandemic, and so on. So my time has been really stretched thin. Even as I write my novel, there are just so many other things that have taken up my time.
Um, okay, Mitchell Momani asks, in your opinion, what are the similarities between being a physician and a detective? That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, he hits on something really, really good. Thank you for that question. The setup basically is very, very similar. Okay, so now when a patient comes in to see a physician, they may say that such and such a thing is bothering me, and I don't know what's wrong. Now, it's actually the same as when a detective comes to the crime scene and sees the dead person. The question is, what caused this? In other words, what are the motives? How did the person die? Which would be kind of like, what disease are we talking about? So, as the detective asks questions of witnesses and suspects and so on, it's the same thing that a doctor does when he asks the patient, okay, number one, when did it start? Which is the same thing as when you ask somebody for their alibi, for example. When did this start? What is it exactly that you're feeling? How long has it been going on, and so on. You keep interrogating and interrogating. And then you start looking for clues, which is exactly what a doctor does. And they look for clues through the physical exam and then the lab tests. Another thing that happens when you're a doctor is that you get thrown off course. Sometimes, for example, you get a lab and you say, aha, that's what's bothering the patient. Then you discover, no, you're wrong. That's not it. And it's the same as when a detective, stumbles across a red herring and then goes off in the wrong direction. And finally, when you find out what is bothering that patient, it's the exact same feeling as when a detective finds out who the culprit of who the murderer actually is. It's that aha moment. I knew it was this. I knew it was you, or I just realized it was you. It just hit me. So it's very much the same experience.
I noticed in this book that one of the characters gets ill, and something, I won't get into everything, but something happens to him. And
Right.
and I was thinking, oh, Kwei, you have the advantage. I mean, you probably knew about that
Yep.
situation,
Yep.
and I was very jealous that you already have that know-how, whereas I'm, scrambling, when I'm trying to think of some kind of medical condition.
Yeah, next time you're free to consult me if you need to.
uh,
Yeah,
okay.
in almost every book you'll find either through the forensic medicine, which I always have, or very often there's a person who is ill, as it does happen in this book, and that's when you see my knowledge on the page, and of course those are very easy for me, to write about. It's the other stuff I have to research, like there's something in there about a DVR, for example. I had to ask one of my good friends who's in the IT business. I said, "Okay, so how does the DVR work?" and so on. So, yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Oh, did we lose? I don't know if we lost Naomi. Did her did her screen freeze? Oh, here. Oh, you're back. Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Your screen
I,
froze for a
I was
moment.
toggling. Okay. So Tori Booker asks, will you be returning to your first series at all? So that was the Darko Dawson series.
Yes. As a matter of fact, I had planned to make the next book that I'm writing. I actually planned it to be a Darko book, but my publisher said, nah, you need to write another Emma. So I got the orders from above. I think they felt that with the success of the first one and the good reception of the second one, let people get a little bit more of a bite, into the delicious sandwich or whatever it is, and then probably after the third, I will bring Darko back. For those of you who are, have agonized over this and are writhing in agony about over Darko, he is actually alive. So if you wondered if he died in the last book, Death by His Grace, no, he didn't actually die. He will be back at some point.
How do you keep those two worlds separate? Is it difficult for you? Has there been any instance where you thought, oh, was that in that series or that series?
No, that doesn't happen. Although what does happen sometimes is that I when I'm writing a new novel, a lot of the it's funny, a lot of the names of my characters from other books just disappear from my mind. I mean, I know who they are and what they did, but I can't put my finger on the actual name, and that might just because I'm horrible at names. But uh, the two books almost never they never seem to cross. And I think that the reason why is that, Emma has a much different approach to solving mysteries than Darko does. One of the reasons for that is she's a private investigator, whereas Darko is a cop himself. So one of the difficulties of a private investigator is that you can't be as confrontational with people as you can when you're a police person, a police man or a police woman or a detective. You have to somehow extract the information in another way. So that's why in this present novel, you see a lot of the detective teams going undercover as other different kind of characters. At one point, Emma is sort of like a house cleaning lady who cleaning up, the lab, and what she's actually doing is scoping the place out, trying to get some information, and so it's a little bit more of a subtle approach. And Emma herself, her personality is rather different in that she's a little bit more nuanced, and part of the reason I think is that, of course, she is a woman, and I think women have a much more nuanced approach to different problems. Men just tend to sort of barrel through the whole thing, like a bull in a china shop. But women have a little bit of a more nuanced approach, and that's definitely what Emma is like. She's less sort of reactive to situations. She's more contemplative, I would say.
Well, she's also targeted, in terms of sexual abuse and so for you to get into Emma's head, how did it affect you in any way to kind of like imagine what it must have felt for her to be so vulnerable and powerless in certain situations?
Well, it's really interesting you ask that question because, Death by His Grace came out 2017, I believe. And, between 2016 and 2018, a lot happened, specifically the Me Too movement. And, I think it woke up, it made a lot of men realize, what? I had no idea that women deal with this stuff almost every day. This constant harassment, sexual assault. And I think it opened the eyes of a lot of men, how how beastly we can be. And I think it's very interesting. At that time was about the time that I had started to work on a female character. And the Me Too movement definitely changed my sensibilities. And anybody who has read The Missing American knows that there was a Me Too movement in that. And so yeah, it really affected my way of thinking. And to me, that makes Emma a little bit more sympathetic to me as the writer. And the other thing that I found was very interesting was that I actually feel more relaxed when I'm writing Emma than I do when I'm writing Darko. And I'm not sure why. It might be the male competition. I'm competing with my male characters subconsciously, and I don't realize it. But I do feel more at ease when I'm writing Emma compared to Darko. In Darko, I feel tense all the time when I'm writing.
Do you think because she's a PI? I mean, do you think that has anything to do with it? I know in the first book she wasn't, but I was just curious too, for you, because one is law enforcement and one is PI. I mean, do you find more freedom in writing more from a PI perspective?
Yes, because in many ways, well, on one level, it's it's more difficult because you've got to think now, how is Emma going to get this information? And then, but the other thing is that you realize that if you can discover how she's going to get this information, then you're opening up a wider world of investigation than you would with, say, a cop who basically goes into the scene, finds out what's going on, questions people, brings them in for interrogation and so on. But with Emma and her partners, it's not like that. especially in Ghana, where asking questions of that nature is not very, it's not well accepted. And I know a few private investigators in Ghana who explained to me that, you have to be very, very sort of soft in your approach when you're trying to get information. You kind of buddy up to people, you know, get them, used to you, maybe invite them to have a drink and things like that. And so it does open a wider world of investigation and techniques of getting information. I think that's what makes Emma's work in some ways very much more interesting.
Yeah, someone told me from Japan, they said they were commenting on me that I was like more Kyoto, which is maybe like what you're saying about Ghana. It's like you don't know what happened because maybe I'm like going around and before you know it, I've got
Yes,
you don't
that's
even
right.
realize it.
Exactly.
Okay, Jan Wilcox asks that you mentioned there are lots of distractions, but what is your preferred way of executing your writing schedule? Do you strive for a certain amount of words per session, or just let the writing flow until you feel it's time to stop for the time being?
Yeah, that's a great question. I always admire these writers who say that, oh yes, every day I write at least 4,000 words. I think who said that? I think it was King Stephen King says he writes, I don't know, 10,000 words a day or whatever it is. I really admire that because there's some days that, especially when there's a lot of other stuff I'm doing, uh, like book tours and things like that. I may not write on that day, and I feel really bad about it, but they're just, life happens sometimes. So I do not strive for a certain number of words. Um, and I don't even strive for a number of chapters because my chapters are so varied in length. So it's whatever I can do on that day. Now, when it's getting close to crunch time, like deadline, then I know, yeah, I got to write 10 pages today, because I just have to do it. And that's when the rubber hits the road. I really have to get it done because somebody's waiting for this manuscript to appear. Um, but early in the process, it's very sort of freewheeling.
Mike asks a really great question. Is there a possibility that you connect both of your characters together? So will there be a book in which Emma and Darko are together?
Well, that's a great question too, because when I first created the prototype Emma was actually a transfer over from the last Darko Dawson novel, because he got a new female assistant. Her name was Mabel, and my feeling was I was going to make Mabel sort of like an offshoot, and that um, she'd be solving her mysteries on her own, but Darko would be there, kind of like a consultant or a mentor or something like that. And my editor, Juliet Grames, said, "No, Kwei, if you're if you're gonna do a new series, it's got to be a new series." So this crossover thing, it didn't work, and I'm really glad that I didn't do it that way, because what was going to happen was that I was going to be kind of restricted by Darko, because Darko would be sort of, and he's a very strong presence. Darko is a very, very strong presence, and I think he would have kind of gotten in the way.
True.
It would have been too restricting for me, and restricting for Emma too as well.
Well, I do like the name. You say you forget names, but I like the names of your like Darko Dawson is a wonderful name. And then with Emma's last name, that Jan, what does it have a meaning, or why did you pick Jan
Well,
as her last name?
I wanted a Ghanaian name that wouldn't be difficult, for Western readers to pronounce. Um, the real indigenous spelling of Jan, DJAN, is actually anglicized. The indigenous spelling would be G, like George, YAN, because GY it's a diphthong pronounced J, like injustice. But if I wrote GYAN, people were gonna say like Gyan, Gian, Gian. Nobody would know what the hell that was. So I used DJAN because I thought that was possibly the easiest. But I noticed that there's some people who have been calling her Dijon. So I still ended up in trouble. But that's okay. And I wanted a two-syllable first name and a one-syllable last name because that seemed like Sherlock Holmes, Emma Jan. I think I read somewhere that that's actually the best combination for names: a two-syllable first name and a one-syllable last name.
Yeah,
and Emma to me is soft. It's a soft name, and I kind of like that about it.
Yeah. I think figuring out the right name, especially for a series, is super important. So
Yeah,
I appreciate
for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think we have maybe about 15 more minutes. I don't know. Max, should we go to a full hour or what is there any? So what are you working on now, Kwei?
I'm working on the next Emma Jan. I've started it. I'm like I think 50 pages in or so. It's called Last Scene in La Paz. La Paz is an area of Accra, and what this story deals with is sex trafficking. There is a huge sex traffic trade between mostly Nigeria and Italy, or Nigeria and Libya, and also Ghana, Libya, Italy.
Wow.
Remember, like years back, there were these huge boatloads of people crossing the Mediterranean trying to get from Libya to Italy or Greece, and a lot of that is slave trading, or I should, yeah, slave in a way, but it's more human and sex trafficking. And so that's what I'm going to be working on. So that also will deal with different areas. It will be Nigeria, Ghana, and even Libya, and that's what I'm working on right now. So that will be another adventure for Emma.
Well, let's end this our time here doing something fun. Of course, everybody, our colleague from Soho. So I'm going to be a Soho. I'm a Soho writer too. My novel is
Wonderful.
coming out in August. It's called
I
Clark
thought I
Edition.
saw that. That's wonderful. That's great.
It's set in Chicago. I'm really excited about it. 1944, and it's talking about the Japanese Americans who were incarcerated during World War II. And when they were released, Chicago was the #1 destination for them.
Oh, yeah.
So
wonderful.
it grew from 400 to 20,000 people in a short amount of time. So so one of our Soho colleagues, Stephen Jones, there was news like his.
Stephen Mac Jones.
His
I got lost Naomi for a second there. Naomi?
So it does look like Naomi is a little frozen right now. Kwei,
okay.
Go ahead. We can go ahead and wait until she reconnects if you'd like, or we could end the event right here. It's completely up
Were
to
there
you.
any other? I didn't see if there were some other questions, maybe. I don't have the questions. Max, are you able to see them or no?
Yeah, there weren't any other questions.
There are no other questions? Okay.
No.
All right then.
We could just wrap it up right here if you'd like.
Okay. All right. But what but what I want to say is thanks so much for hosting us, Max and Vromans, and thanks for everybody for joining us. There'll be another. We'll be having another. I'll be having another event at Once Upon a Crime next week, and then after that it'll be at Poison Pen the following week. So I'll let everybody know about that as well.
Cool. Kwei, thank you so much. That was wonderful. I wish I could thank Naomi too. I'll see her. I'll tell her thank you.
I'll thank her offline.
Awesome, perfect. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank
And
you.
I hope you all have a good night.
Okay.
I'll see you later.
Good night. Bye.